Today, I would like to welcome David Anderson, Hermetic scientist, to the Cauldron of Curiosities. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, apart from the traffic trying to get here today. So first of all, I would like to ask you, what's stirring your pot this week?
I tend not to let things get to me to that extent. I find that if there's things that you cannot change, then there's no point sweating over them. If there are things that you can, get on with it, deal with it, move on. Getting angry or annoyed over things is a waste of your energy, and it's a form of depression which will take you in a spiral downwards. So my pot is fairly empty at the moment, but you never know, maybe something.
Yes.
One day.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing that I wanted to ask you, I have been talking to people about your role as a Hermetic scientist, and many of them don't know what a Hermetic scientist is. Can you explain in relatively simple terms what it is?
Simple terms. Wow, okay. Nothing simple about it. It is a very, very ancient system. It's shamanic in origin. It's become known as Hermetic by the Greeks much later on, but it is a system of understanding the natural world and its effect on the human condition, and how things work, not only within but also without. Understanding the nature of chemicals, understanding the nature of stars, planets, formations of things. Literally every aspect of existence is analysed and looked into. Hermeticism isn't a religion per se, in as much as we don't have divinities. We see the divinity as being us. We are the divine. We are the gods and goddesses, if you want to go down that route. Because each time we look for divinity, we find nature. We don't find a single god or a goddess or something like that. We find ourselves and the creatures that surround us and the wildlife that's around us and the planet and the solar system.
Who was the first Hermetic scientist, do you know?
The very first one was Hermes Trismegistus, and he was just effectively a scientist that had questions and looked for answers. And he is effectively the one that started this concept of Hermetic science. And Hermeticism has left on to things like hermetically sealed. We invented that. It also led on to the hermit, because we tend to be solitary. We understand the nature of how we work and the energies that we use. It is better to be on your own, because people can be affected adversely when you employ your energy to be able to create a paradox, a change in existence with your will.
Okay. And would you say that Hermetic scientists are naturally curious people?
You are driven by curiosity. It's an obsession. Even as a child, I wanted to know the ins and outs. I would have probably been described as a destructive child, because I would have a toy and I would want to know how it worked. Why did it make that noise when I pushed it? So I would put it apart to see how it worked. And that was always, fortunately, my mother understood my curiosity and took into the habit of buying one to play with, one to analyse.
Yeah.
She would do that, and I'd get a second one, which I could. Because the trouble is, when you're a kid, you learn how to take things apart, but you don't know how to put them back together again.
Yeah.
And particularly in the 60s and the 70s, everything was sort of plastic and it was glued. So once you pulled it apart, that was it. It was ruined. I understood how it worked, but now I had just pieces.
Yeah. No, I remember. It sort of reminds me of some of those Cindy dolls and the things that came with it, and yes, it's they were. You could see the plastic line on them where they had been mould injected, hadn't they?
Mm.
So, when would you say that your pathway as a Hermetic scientist started?
On that, I'm very, very lucky in as much as I was born into a pagan family. The Highlands of Scotland, in particular areas, is still very pagan. As much as Christianity came into Scotland, Scotland is like Ireland. There's pockets of paganism that went on and continued ever since. Because Scotland is Catholic. Because the Church of England is Catholic, like Ireland. And a lot of the Scots people are actually Irish. So they brought with them that paganism, and it stayed. And fortunately, my family was all part of the pagan. We're actually in a place called Esig, which is now a suburb of Inverness. But it's not that far from East Boleskine, which is where Crowley's place was, because he found that he could focus there because the people around him were Hermetic. Although Thelema is a form of Hermeticism, it's more religion-based than science-based. So we've always had that. So my start was always one of pagan, which always brought me into contention with my primary school, which was St. Mary's Roman Catholic Primary School run by nuns.
Yeah. So what was the first thing that you did that you consciously know was following that pathway?
Asking my grandmother at 12 to teach me her ways. And that's her pendant.
And you're showing me a circular pendant with a pentagram on?
Pentagram on one side and a delta on the other.
Delta on the other side, thank you.
Is,
so how old is that pendant now?
That's over 150 years old now, because that was her mother's. And because I was raised by my grandmother after the age of 10, because my mother died at 10 when I was 10. So she became my legal guardian.
And what did your grandmother say when you asked her to teach you?
She hesitated because my family's got a very strange history. For some reason, only girls appear all throughout the generations. Boys, if they do, don't live long and they don't do well. But girls, no problem all the way through. So my mother is one of 7 sisters. My grandfather kept on at my grandmother every couple of years, hoping for a boy, which never happened. My mother, knowing the history of the family that they only ever had girls, ended up having me. I was the fly in the ointment. I was the one that wasn't expected.
Yeah.
So nobody really knew what to do with me because the knowledge had always been passed down from women, mother to daughter, grandmother to granddaughter, so on. And then there's me, the one solitary male that stayed alive. Yeah. Albeit there was a few times in my youth where bronchitis, but my mother had the foresight to ship me off to my aunt's in Liverpool. So I was able to survive that, and I've never had it since. But asking my grandmother when I was age 12 if she would bring me in and start to teach me. And she thought about it, she thought, well, there's no reason as to why I couldn't. We'll just see how it goes, and just played it by ear. And so she began to show me the books, show me different scriptures, ideas, concepts. And already knew that I was curious because it seemed that I'd pick up how to be a farrier and a blacksmith. We worked on a sheep farm, took to that, no problem. I worked things out. I would have a natural curiosity in the world around me that I would want to understand. So she did. She started teaching me, and she started to show me as a student, then into a neophyte, then as a zealotor, and so on, and theoricus, practicus, philosophus. And eventually I managed to go through all those different degrees.
So did your grandmother teach all of her daughters?
Yes. But not all of the daughters followed it.
Yeah.
With Hermetic science, it does not allow you to, it's a truth which sometimes is hard to accept.
Mm-hmm.
You can hold a series of theories and conjectures and go down a line only to find out that you're totally wrong, that you screwed up. And you've got to accept that you are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes a lot of people find that very, very difficult.
It is difficult though, isn't it, to admit you're wrong?
And if you can't do that, then you're going to stay on a false path.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to keep following along that line and not really, what you're doing is you're creating your own world. You're not living in the real world, because that's got a harsh truth to it, which you've already denied. So now you're in a series of worlds that you are creating out of your own imagination, because they fit your rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
And you will be very aggressive about that, because it's destroying everything that you know. But if you can accept the fact that you can be wrong,
mm-hmm.
and accept the fact that there is a reality, a truth, that nature has decided that that's the way it is, and whether you agree with it or whether you don't, doesn't change a darn thing. That's the way it's going to be. You've got to accept it.
And that can be quite difficult, can't it?
It can be.
To do.
It is. You think, is it really that way? Yes. You've got to accept that natural law, universal law, is sacrosanct. You can break the laws of man. You can bend them and twist them and amend them and create them and repeal them. But the laws of nature, the universal law, is a constant which the whole universe is based on. And if you can't agree with it, well, it doesn't give a rat's ass about you. It's going to carry on, because that's how the universe works, not you.
Yeah.
That's as harsh as it is, and that can be very, very difficult.
I suppose there's always that aspect, isn't there, that sometimes we overestimate our own importance and how we fit into the universal scheme of things. But that's a natural psychological phenomenon.
Yeah, that's...
I'll never say that word. But it's quite natural for us to think we're the most important person, because we are in our own heads.
Yeah. I mean, as you say, that is very much of a natural state of being. But that's fueled by a sense of our own importance that we've created for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And because we are always supposed to be better than nature. If you think of all the things and innovations that's happened over the centuries, to improve nature, we must clear this land and we will improve nature. Or, like the recent thing, the bugbear that's going on, is a Bovier to be given to cattle to reduce the level of methane.
Mm.
That's got nothing to do with cows. It's just an avoidance to deal with the fact that human industry is the one that's creating it.
Yes.
Even though it's a minuscule amount. But we can improve this by, damaging cows' digestive systems.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't take into account that all the other ruminants like camels, antelope, muskox, buffalo, giraffes. Cows only constitute 17%
Mm-hmm.
of all the ruminants in the world. The rest of them is wildlife.
Yeah.
So what difference is...
But that makes me worry. Are they going to start trying to feed that into natural places so that they can control? Is that something they're going to do? Or what level of interference? That's what I would be curious about, is what are they going to do next? Because sometimes we notice that they will use diversionary tactics. I say they as in Big Pharma, for example, who's making money out of this. But something will happen that will divert our gaze, and everybody be busy, focused on that, and then in the background, something like Bovia will be released. Because it had to have been released, because surely if Arla knew about the backlash, it would not have even announced it was using it.
Well, you're looking at dispersing it into the wildlife over the entire planet. Because every continent, every country has ruminants as part of its natural wildlife. Even the camel. The camel itself doesn't actually have 4 stomachs, but it has 4 compartments in its stomach, which still makes it a ruminant. So every single animal would have to be affected.
Yeah.
And that logistically is just impossible to do. You know, the conspiracy theories have that we could do this, that, and the other, and whatnot. When it gets down to the reality of it, you think, oh, well, all humans are under surveillance. No, there's 8 billion humans on this planet. There is no way, Jose, that you could ever be under surveillance unless you've done something to arouse suspicion from the authorities. Then they will be watching you on a local level and this sort of thing.
Although, on that note, most people's phones are quite good at surveying what you're up to, and people who've got Alexa in their houses, because you can go back into the history of Alexa, especially if you've been having an argument with somebody about what has been said in the past, and Alexa will share your previous conversations because she's listening out to you giving her a voice command, so you can go into the records and dig it all out.
Yeah, but that's not governments that's watching.
No, it isn't the government, no.
It's somebody actually waiting to sell you something. I did something yesterday on the our group, where because last month, you remember, I was asked the question about the tin hats, and I said
Yes.
the tin hats work very well as long as they're plugged into earth. And over the last few days, there's been a lot of advertisements for ground sheets and ground mats, which are earthed into the socket.
Yeah.
Exactly the same way as I've always been talking about over the years. Great, the Faraday effect, or to remove excessive electrical impulses in the body. I did one search to find a picture which I could post on the group. Facebook, X, Instagram, I'm inundated with adverts for ground sheets, all different companies. There's about 20 different companies now I've found that are all doing this sort of thing. So they are watching what you're doing, not the government, not the police or secret services, but companies to sell you product.
Yeah. And most people, when they go onto a website, the website's privacy policy includes a statement around your data being used for marketing purposes, and how many times do people actually go in and have a look and see what they're agreeing to when they sign up.
And there's usually so much of it that you look at it and think, oh, I can't be asked with that.
Yeah, yeah.
And you sign off on something and you're allowing somebody to do something, and then you complain about it and they say, well, there it is, section 19.3b.
That's right.
And
Okay.
you agreed to it. You made a contract.
That's right. So going back to the Hermetic science pathway,
Yeah.
can you remember the first thing that your grandmother taught you?
Yes, I can. It was how to keep myself safe mentally.
Are you able to share that?
It was I mean, you've got to realise that she's talking to a 12-year-old, 13-year-old teenager who's still a bit skitsy and excited about it all. But she showed me that if you are calm, quiet, you see more, you hear more, you can smell more, you can taste more, and you feel more. You've got 5 senses. You are more aware of them when you are still. When you are moving and agitated and whatnot, then everything's happening around you and you are oblivious to it. So she taught me stillness. And that stillness allowed me to be aware of what was going on around me. And interesting enough, it was an absolutely brilliant lesson to learn from when I went into the army.
Yeah.
To have that stillness, not moving, to be quiet.
But it's also a shamanic practice as well, isn't it?
It is a very ancient shamanic practice to have that stillness.
Yeah.
Let the world move around you. And as you go with the world, you can see it unfolding and unrealized. It's a hell of a high when you actually get into that shamanic state of total stillness.
It's surprising what will come into your area once you settle in. Wildlife and insects will come in investigating because they know you're there, but you're no longer a threat.
Yeah.
And I found that, I found it really enjoyable and enlightening on what was happening around me. And I have actually tried to do it with a dog attached, which can be interesting, but eventually it was challenging. But he actually settled into it eventually. And I thought that he wasn't engaging with the process. And then one day, I don't know why, I stopped what I was doing and I looked and he was stood still on guard. So he stopped being the aggressor and he was just waiting on the outer part of the space, completely still, whilst I was doing whatever I wanted to do. And it allowed the energy to completely change. And I realised he had changed from being constantly twitching and going, oh, there's a bird or a mouse, I'm going to go and pounce on it, to going, you're doing something, I recognise it, and I'm just going to be still and allow it to happen. But just in case, I've got your back.
You know, so all animals do it. They all have that moment of stillness, of calm. No matter what they're doing, if preparing to hunt or preparing to escape from a hunt or having escaped, they have this ability to be able to just be still and to release all that sort of negative energy that may be as a result of trauma or fear because they have been hunted by something. They release and they become that still. And you can see the physical changes in them. Yeah. Where you see like a young deer might be running from a fox or something like that. She will get to a point where they all go still. There's that release, and suddenly they're all back to being skippity hop. Their emotions have changed. They are in a completely different mindset, and they are free. Yep. They're also free of the trauma of the event that happened before. So they're not carrying that forward with them. It's now there's a line, move forward. Yeah. And we have that. We're animals too.
Yes.
We're part of subset of apes that have lost our fur.
Animals are very good at living in the moment, though, aren't they?
Yes.
And it's interesting how some are better at not looking back than others. And he's particularly bad at not looking back, because I've noticed that sometimes I will want him to go forward and forget what's just happened, and he'll turn around and go after what just happened.
Yeah, it might be retaliation as well.
So that can be challenging, and the backgroundoid is Bumble walking around, shaking and wanting attention.
Yeah, you brought your own sound effects.
I know, you might have been able to have heard a seagull going overhead as well. So, what keeps you curious about Hermetic science?
I haven't finished learning. That's the drive. There's more to know, there's more.